Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Ritchie, and I am the John and Kathy Martin Associate Provost and Vice President for Innovation at the University of Notre Dame. For those of you that don't know, I lead the Idea Center. The Idea Center stands for Innovation, De-risking, and Economic Acceleration. Our group here is really focused on starting new companies, investment into those companies, and primarily changing the local ecosystem around innovation and economic development. And if you haven't had a chance to see what we do, we would invite you to connect with us and learn more about that, and would invite you to get engaged and participate in this project. Over the last 4 years, we've started well over 100 companies and raised an investment fund that we use to build those companies, and then are working with many of our alums and friends of the university, as well as other connections in our network as mentors and advisors and board members. So plenty of opportunity to get engaged if you would like to. We welcome you to this webinar. Few ground rules before we start. Because it's a webinar, neither we as speakers nor the other attendees can hear or see you. So if you have a question for us, please use the Q&A feature within the Zoom app. And this is important, that rather than sending a chat, which because of the way the Zoom is structured for these webinars, we might miss. It might only go to a certain person within the organization that's not actually on the webinar. So make sure that you use the Q&A feature, and we'll spend time in the last half of this webinar answering those questions. So today it's our great privilege to have Elizabeth Abeyta-Price, who is the co-founder and CEO of Impact Capital Funds. She previously served as COO of Price Wealth Management and owner of Lifetime Design Consulting and lead grief facilitator at the Maximum Security Prison for Adolescent Girls in Martin County, Florida for Suncoast Kids Place. Elizabeth, that's very interesting. We might have to dive on that a little bit. Elizabeth has also just completed her first children's book of historical fiction, and is now working to complete a book on time management and values-based goal setting. Elizabeth grew up in a bilingual home in working class rural New Mexico. Her parents were high school graduates, but did not have sufficient financial capacity to provide her with a private university education. But she received a Westinghouse physics scholarship and was designated a Notre Dame scholar, which provided the full funding necessary for her to complete her studies at Notre Dame. She received her BA cum laude from the University of Notre Dame in 1984 and continued her studies at Notre Dame as a Ford Foundation pre-doctoral fellow in developmental and counseling psychology from 1988 to 1991. She has served as president of the Notre Dame Club of Stuart, Florida for almost 20 years, during which time the club has been designated Outstanding Club of the Year by the ND Alumni Association 4 times. She has been an active volunteer in her parish for more than 20 years and with her son's Boy Scout troop until 2014, when he achieved the rank of Eagle, which is also amazing. My sons are also Eagles, Elizabeth, so that's great.
Congratulations, Brian.
Yeah, all 4 of them, so yeah, myself included.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh.
In her free time, Elizabeth enjoys long distance swimming, gourmet cooking, reading, bird watching, and politics. So welcome, Elizabeth. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so fun. This whole topic about impact investing, which we'll get to in just a minute, but before we do, always like to start with maybe a little background on you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, your history, kind of what brought you from rural New Mexico to impact investing and what you're working on now?
I'd be happy to, but let me, I'm going to take a bit of an aside right off the
Hey,
bat.
Elizabeth, for some reason, I think we've lost your sound.
Let me double check.
Still don't hear her. I hope that's not me.
So I got a note that someone else can hear me on my chat.
Yeah, I still don't hear you. Oh, you can hear? Okay, so everyone else can hear her. It must be me.
Okay.
I'm glad that they can all hear you. So let's find out what my problem is here. All of a sudden it just cut out. Try again, Elizabeth, see if I can hear you now.
All right, Brian, testing.
I can hear you. For whatever
Okay.
my System just decided now is a good time to quit, so I turned and now I can hear you. So
Well,
sorry, let's go again.
in our pre-meeting, I told you that I often jinx technology, so I think I'll take credit for that, or I'll take the blame for that. I was going to say I'm going to take a bit of an aside, not knowing that you were an Eagle Scout or that your sons were Eagle Scouts. My son's involvement in scouting came because of me, and I'm going to take full credit for it because my father was a Boy Scout leader, my older brother an Eagle Scout, and I was the ultimate tomboy. And my goal in life was to be able to go to Philmont Boy Scout camp in northern New Mexico. Well, so by the time it came for my son to go to Philmont, we were here living in Florida. He didn't want his mom to tag along, so I have yet to go to Philmont. So I'm planning forward so that my grandsons will eventually want their grandmother, if I can still make it at that point, to go to Philmont. Anyway, I just thought I would throw that in.
Yeah.
So about myself, my story, taking me from northern New Mexico to especially to South Bend as a student, is really at the core even of the impact investment company that we have co-founded. So I'm going to give you a little bit of detail, and I want you, as you listen to the detail about myself, I want you and everyone else who's on the webinar to also consider the hundreds and thousands of similar stories that could be told by people just like me. So as you mentioned, I grew up in northern New Mexico, in the city of Espanola, New Mexico. I'm the youngest of 3 children, and my brother, who's closest in age to me, is 9 years older than I am. So northern New Mexico encompasses, I would say, from Santa Fe northward. And I lived in a teeny tiny town that's kind of in the triangle between Santa Fe, which is the state capital, Taos, which people are familiar with because of skiing, because of the art community, and Los Alamos, which was the birthplace of course, the atomic bomb. So I lived on one of those, one of the legs of that triangle. And Espanola is and was a very economically depressed community. For the most part, not known for anything, except recently we've gained some notoriety because we oftentimes have one of the highest heroin overdose rates in the country. But growing up, it was a very simple lifestyle. My father had fought in World War II as a Navy Seabee. He, right after high school, he joined the Navy and was in the South Pacific steaming his way to Japan on December 7th. My mom, who actually also grew up in Espanola, she took the secret train up from Espanola to Los Alamos. And when I say secret train, of course, no one knew that Los Alamos was a research facility or that they were developing the bomb. Both of my parents were incredibly bright. In fact, there's a company out of Nigeria, I believe, called Andela. They're a tech company and also a talent company, talent accelerator. And the founder has said something that has always struck with me. She said that genius is distributed globally evenly, but opportunities are not. And so that really is a profound statement when you think about the fact that the people that are on this webinar and people that graduate from Notre Dame and all of the best institutions in the world, their talent is multiplied worldwide, but the opportunity to achieve, to maximize their potential is not. So anyway, my parents did not go to anything beyond high school. And I never had more than a very lower middle class funding in my home. My parents also had a very conflictual marriage, a not happy marriage, and my father left when I was a junior in high school. I say that not to engender any kind of pity, but because I want you to know and everyone here to know that there was a real incentive for me to leave both the area in which I was born and also the family, the conflictual family in which I grew up. So I was lucky enough to receive several offers to attend college. and I say this again for a particular reason, not to brag, Stanford, West Point, heaven forbid, the University of Alabama, which heaven forbid. Sorry if any of you are from the University of Alabama. So Notre Dame invited me to go out to visit the university in March of my junior year for something that was called Antostal Weekend.
Mhm.
So any of you of a certain age will know that Antostal is an Irish celebration, a Gaelic celebration. I don't know what the original meaning of the celebration was, but at Notre Dame, it involved a lot of drinking and a lot of hijinks. And so that's the weekend where I was invited to go out. Now, how they picked that weekend, I have no idea. I had actually been rather sheltered, so I had never been to a party where alcohol was served. And to be honest, I was a little intimidated, a little worried about whether or not this would be a fit. So what happened is the Sunday morning before I was slated to leave to go back home to Espanola, I went to the grotto. It was a Sunday morning. Everyone else was sleeping in after Saturday evening's festivities. I got up early and went to the grotto, and I was kneeling at the grotto, praying for guidance, discernment, and I heard something behind my left shoulder, and I turned, and there were three massive human beings running up the road from St. Mary's to the grotto. And they were young men. They were all dressed similarly, but they were the largest human beings I had ever seen in my life. And I panicked. I was a bit frozen, and I thought, what do I do? Do I get up? Do I run? Do I stay? I was there long enough prevaricating before, or contemplating what to do before they arrived at the grotto. They all knelt down to my left, and I, again, kind of out of the corner of my eye, I looked to see who they were, and I realized that they must be football players because there were no other people that big in creation. And they knelt there and they prayed quietly for probably 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then silently they all got up and they ran off. And I thought to myself, if this is a place where people like that can kneel and pray, this is a place for me. And so it was at that moment that I decided that I knew that I had found a home in Notre Dame. Notre Dame has given me everything that I have. So as you mentioned, I began as a physics major, Westinghouse Physics Scholarship and Notre Dame Scholar. This is where things get interesting and where it leads me to where I am today. So my family could certainly not have ever afforded for me to attend Notre Dame. Even a public school would have been difficult had I not received, scholarships. And so the condition for me to maintain my Notre Dame scholarship, which essentially gave me a full ride for all 4 years, the only condition was that I maintain a 3.0 GPA, which I had only received one B before in my entire life, so that didn't seem like that was that big of a deal. It was a big deal the first time I walked into my 8 o'clock calculus class, and it was the calculus 118, 119, so calculus for engineers. And calculus was not offered at my high school, only pre-calculus was offered at my high school, no AP courses or anything. And so brother, and thank goodness I don't remember his name, his full name. I know he was a Holy Cross brother, and it's a good thing I don't remember his full name because, well, I wouldn't have a lot of happy things to say about brother. He began class by saying, I'm sure that you're all familiar with most of this material, so we'll begin on chapter 7. And I thought to myself, well, I've never seen anything in chapters 1 through 6 at all. And so I immediately approached him after first Notre Dame class. And I said, brother, I've never taken calculus, and can you point me to some tutors and he mentioned to me, and this was the truth, that at that time there was only tutoring services available for students at risk of failing. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I can't get a B in this class. So that's pretty darn close to failing for me, but that didn't meet the criteria. Anyway, by the end of that first semester, my cumulative GPA was only a 2.69. Um, and that was devastating for me. For me personally, it was terrifying, not only devastating, because I received a letter from the university telling me that my scholarship was at risk unless I could bring my cumulative GPA above a 3.0 by the end of the following semester. So, my math was good enough to know that I needed pretty darn close to a 4.0 in order to bring the cumulative GPA above the 3.0. So I changed majors. Um, it ended up being fine. I feel like that was, I ended up majoring in government and international relations. I did get a 4.0 my second semester, brought up my cumulative GPA, and I remained above a 3.0 the rest of my time at Notre Dame. But that was the first time that I had to make a decision about my life based on money.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. So then, I met my husband my freshman year at Notre Dame. We met our freshman year, dated our sophomore year, were engaged our junior year, married our senior year, and then our daughter was born the year after that. We were married at the Basilica. So the fact that I had gone to Notre Dame on full scholarship meant that I had no student loans, and my husband's family had been able to provide his education, so he had no school loans. So we had a lot of choices with our life. He began work for a Catholic parish here in Southern Florida, and I taught high school at a Catholic high school. If we had had student loans, I don't know that those would have been options for us, because we would have had at that point we also had a daughter, our first daughter. I don't know that we would have been able to afford student loans, working for the church or Catholic high school, and raising our family. So the fact that we didn't have loans or indebtedness gave us options. After a few years, we moved back to South Bend. After I taught high school, and boy, teaching high school was a real. I taught ninth graders, and so for any of you who either have ninth graders or have taught ninth graders, they're not the easiest bunch of creatures to be around. But they in some ways changed my life, because I was touched. I was very close in age to them. First of all, I was only 21 at the time, 21, 22, and several of them confided in me. This was a private high school, Cardinal Newman High School in Palm Beach, Florida, West Palm Beach, Florida, and a number of the students lived on Palm Beach. And I heard some of the most heart-wrenching stories about um, family internal poverty. These children were from great wealth and had tremendous internal poverty in their family lives. And I thought to myself, by this point, we had two little girls. And I thought to myself, I really have to figure out what teenagers, what these creatures are, how to work with them before my own children reach that age. Um, I, I, I decided I wanted to go into counseling psychology at that point, even though I had been a government major. But again, because of finances, and Craig and I did a lot of research to get a master's degree in counseling education at Notre Dame, or pretty much anywhere, it's considered a professional degree. It's not an academic degree. So there isn't the kind of funding available for it. So my decision to do a PhD was based on financial considerations. I was lucky enough. I applied for one of the 100 Ford Foundation pre-doctoral fellowships that year in developmental psychology. Even though I wanted to go into counseling psychology, there was not a pre-doctoral fellowship in counseling psychology. So I decided to do both. Again, I did both in order to get the funding to get myself counseling education. So I went back to Notre Dame in 1987 and began my doctoral work there. And so I'm going to hop forward a bit. All of my children attended Notre Dame, graduated from Notre Dame. My son-in-law went to Notre Dame. One of my daughter's significant others is a huge Subway alum, although he went elsewhere, not the University of Alabama.
Mhm.
Um, and so I have, you mentioned that I have been president of the Notre Dame Club for about 20 years. I have always said, for anyone who knows me, that I will spend the rest of my life giving back to Notre Dame, because Notre Dame has given me everything that is of value to me: my education, my family, the people that I love the most. And so that is what took me from Espanola to South Bend. When we came back to South Florida from South Bend the second time, I began a consulting company, Lifetime Design Consulting. I worked with small businesses as well as individuals. And the way that I describe it is values based. So I helped people or companies identify what was important to them, in the business setting. What were the business, what were their business goals, and then work backwards to help them meet those, both in terms of setting, middle term goals as well as their time, and the same as individuals. So it's been all about helping people identify their goals and working backwards to structure their lives, whether it's time or now their finances, to help them meet those goals. So that's a bit of a long story, but when you ask somebody at my age to tell you about their lives, you get a longer story.
No, I appreciate that. And so there's several points in there that I think you would probably point to that have impacted your decision to move into this impact investing area. Let's talk a little bit about impact investing in general from your perspective. What is it, so that our listeners can understand exactly what we're talking about, and why your interest in that? I mean, obviously that's going to harken back to some of your experiences there, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing right now as well. So what from your perspective, let's talk a little bit about impact investing first and what it is.
Okay. I'm going to give you a couple of different short definitions, but then I want to talk a little bit more in depth about them. So, in a nutshell, impact investing is about harnessing private capital for a social good. Okay, if you take nothing else from this, although that's not quite adequate, but if you take nothing else, that's something to keep in your mind. So, harnessing private capital for a social good. So Ronald Cohen, who is actually known as the father of impact investing, and I'll talk about him maybe a little bit more. He describes impact investing as a chain reaction. Okay, so if you can hold both of those in your head a little bit, I want to step back from just impact investing to talking about finance in general.
Mhm.
And I think that the definition that fits best for me is Robert Shiller's definition. So Robert Shiller is in the S&P Case-Shiller Home Price Index, professor at Yale, winner of the 2013 Nobel Prize in Economics. He defines, and this is critical, he defines finance as the science of goal architecture, where finance is the structuring of the economic necessities or the economic arrangements necessary to achieve a set of goals. Okay, so going back to what I said about helping people set goals, finance is the structuring of the economics to achieve that set of goals. So finance is not, and investing is not in and of itself simply about making money as an end in and of itself. It is about harnessing capital, investor capital, engineering that capital in the pursuit of a certain set of goals. So if you think about venture capital, so taking a step away from impact investing to venture capitalists put their money at risk. They provided their investment dollars to create the architectural foundation for the technological revolution that's changed the world in the last 25 years. Impact investing is similar in the sense that it takes private capital and harnesses it, engineers it, structures it in order to achieve a set of either environmental or social goals.
Mhm.
So, and while the terminology impact investing is new, it has been evolving. So let me tell you what I mean by evolving. Even back in the 1960s, there was socially responsible investing where institutions came under considerable pressure to divest from either companies that were felt to be amoral or immoral or unethical. So think, for instance, companies that relied heavily on child labor, or companies in apartheid South Africa, um, guns, tobacco, alcohol. And even to this day, you know, the present equivalent of that, and the present pressure that a lot of institutions are coming under pressure to divest from, are things like um, private prisons. Okay, so where it is not only, you know, the return on the investment that's of importance, but what the underlying moral considerations are. So that was kind of everything else. I'm not sure that I can draw a direct line, but I'm going to say that everything else has kind of evolved from that socially responsible notion of investing. By the mid knots, by the mid zeros, so around 2005, the term ESG, and I'm sure most of you all are familiar now with ESG investing. Um, the terminology was coined. ESG investing is looking at factors, environmental factors, the company's consideration of environmental factors, social factors, and governance factors, and the implications that that has monetarily on the bottom line of those companies, as a way for investors to decide whether or not that's a good investment for them. So the criteria, while not necessarily in and of itself having a social impact, it's a bit of a screen. So if, you know, and it's a monetary screen. So this is kind of moving away from just the socially responsible, what is the moral or the ethical considerations. These factors have real financial implications on companies, and they impact or they should impact our willingness to invest in certain companies. So around the same time, so that was in 2005, the ESG investing kind of got a name. It actually did get a name. At the same time, in 2007, the Rockefeller Foundation coined the term impact investing. The difference with that is that they use that term to apply to investments that could actually measurably benefit individuals, society, or the planet. So this was not just, these were specific measurable benefits that companies could have on, again, individuals, societies, or the planet. So now I'm going to jump back to Sir Ronald Cohen. So Sir Ronald Cohen, he himself is a fascinating, and if you ever have a chance to read his book, his most recent book, Impact, he talks about the fact that now we are not only looking at our responsibility as business owners to our shareholders, but also to all of the stakeholders in our purview. So instead of just looking at a business opportunity or an investment opportunity in terms of what are the possible risks, what is the potential return, but the third and equal factor is what is the impact that it has. So it's a married, in fact, he even uses the word married. So he says that risk return should be married to impact. So there's another tremendous book entitled The Power of And. So Jeffrey Moore, he's actually the CEO of a company up in Montreal called Impact And. He was talking to me about one of his sons, and who, you know, was looking at investing, and the son was telling him what the investment returns could be, and his father's response is, and what? So return on investment, financial return on investment is not always sufficient. So then the next logical question is, and what else does it do? So again, when you go back to that whole, to the original conversation about what finance is, and it's the science of goal architecture, here's where we can use impact investing to take a look at larger worldwide goals. So for instance, in 2014, all of the United Nations member states voted in agreement to uphold the 2030 Sustainable Development goals. And 17 goals were set out as goals to achieve by 2030. At that point, the Rockefeller Foundation estimated that even within the first 10 years, it would take 50 to 70 billion dollars a year of investment to achieve those goals. And that wasn't even counting the $12 trillion necessitated by the Paris Climate Accord. So we're back to talking about finance and money, as well as these very laudable goals, which included ending poverty, making certain that there was clean water for everyone, cleaning the oceans, providing for education, reducing inequalities around the world. All of those come with the price tag. So if governments were unable or unwilling to foot the bill, and philanthropic donations are unable to even meet that goal, because even philanthropic donations, institutional philanthropic donations, are about $150 billion a year. That's insufficient over the lifetime to meet all of these goals. So what is the solution? The solution then is to tap into the $200 trillion that is currently invested in worldwide financial markets, and make it possible for investors to benefit. I'm not talking about providing any kind of philanthropic. I'm talking about making it possible for investors to experience a gain, a financial gain, minimize their risks, and diversify their portfolio, while providing the funding necessary, that structural funding necessary to create those economic arrangements in the achievement of social goals. So, we know that there is about $90 trillion right now of worldwide capital invested under the principles of responsible investing. Those are the ESG criteria. Those are just regular household companies that we know and are invested in. And many of them have factored in ESG criteria into their financial models, so that we know how much their good use of water, or their governance, the transparency of their governance. We have been able to put some money, some financial numbers associated with that. So when you're looking at plain old household investments, you can actually look at what their ESG models are there, and how well they're aligned with that. So impact investing is slightly different, because it's looking for ways to benefit, measurably benefit from investing in companies and programs that benefit society at large and the world at large. And in that way, it really is, back to what I said at the very beginning, a chain reaction. So you invest in something and it has ripple effects.
Yeah. I love your definition of finance as a structure toward a goal. And you can see how in many of these cases, if there are specific goals, and probably, there's so many different areas that we can impact for the social good, the individual good, the world good, the planet good, some bigger than others, obviously. And so there's this opportunity to move past simple greed on return to saying, okay, I could still get a return, but I also want to impact some area. And then the key then, I guess, and I'm interested in hearing how you're thinking about this for the area that you're working in, is how do we structure then these financial instruments in a way to provide all of those things, right? And I think at this point, you're working in this area of student debt, student financing, and I guess coming again back to your experiences as a student, in terms of how would we create an environment where people can get through school, we can even the playing field, we can access genius from wherever it comes, and make sure that it's available that way, while still providing returns for investors and still providing these opportunities. Maybe tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how it's working, and what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, well, so you said something that's very key. You said, how do we structure And so I'm going to say we need novel financial mechanisms to do that, because the regular just looking at investments in terms of risk return is insufficient. So there need to be novel financial mechanisms. That's actually what we've created at Impact Capital Funds, and with specifically with our first fund, the Irish Impact Fund. So you're right that this harkens back to my own personal experience, and the huge effect that receiving scholarship money had for me. I'll also say that as president of the Notre Dame Club, I have been frustrated. I've been in the realm of fundraising for scholarships for the last 20 years, for as long as I've been club president. One of the things that is hardest for me is when I get word that there is a brilliant young student who's been accepted to the university, and I always have interaction with them, even around the time that they receive their financial aid package. And this is, by the way, this is in no way a criticism of Notre Dame's financial aid process or packaging or the generosity of university benefactors. But I will say that there are times when I'm talking to students or their parents, and they say, you know, we've been given this financial aid package and it's just insufficient. It's just not enough. We would have to take out so much in student loans. And then they go on to tell me that the University of Miami, 2 hours down the road, is offering their son or daughter a full ride. And it breaks my heart. So I know, you know, we've lost 2 doctors to the university. Well, I mean, they obviously became doctors to the University of Miami. I don't know who else we've lost, but I know that there are talented students out there who need scholarship money. So the way that this comes back to what we are doing and what we have done is we have created one of these novel financial solutions. So it is a hybrid what we have done, and I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go to impactcapitalfunds.com to take a look at our entire product. But really what it is this: we invite investors to make a 7-year term agreement with us to invest their money. At the onset of the 7 years, we take 75% of their investment dollars and we refinance student loans. Now, the student loans that we're refinancing are prime student loans of students who have attended some of the best universities in the country, whose universities have a historical 98% repayment rate. So we're deliberately picking students who go to schools with the highest repayment rate, and we're refinancing their student loans down to between 3.5% and 4.5%, a little bit above that for international students, but we're refinancing their loans. So they will be repaying investors during all 7 years. In addition to that, the other 25% of the investors' dollars, initial commitment, we're investing in a booster strategy, and it's the EDIP investor strategy. It's Enhanced Dividend Income Portfolio. It's run by Capital Wealth Planning, which is an independent firm out of Naples, Florida. They are ranked #1 in their category by Morningstar. They have a 5-star rating by Morningstar for both 5 and 7-year portfolios. And so that 25% that is in that booster strategy, it enhances the performance of the interest rates that students are paying back to investors. So investors can expect, and you know, our target is a 4% rate of return, 4+ rate of return. 4 is coming primarily from interest rate repayments. And then the booster strategy enhances that. So we're hoping between a 4 and 7% rate of return. This is where, so I talked about structuring towards an end goal. Our ultimate goal, while it will help students who are burdened with high interest rate loans, it will help them immensely. We can talk about the different groups that it will disproportionately help. But ultimately, at the very end, and each year, anything above that 4% target rate that we're telling our investors that they can expect annually, anything above that, that profit is going to be split 50-50 between investors. So investors will get 50%. And then that other 50% is going to go to the creation of scholarships. So, and if there are some investors who don't want all of that money to go to scholarships, they can invest half of that, so 25% of the entire after hurdle profit, to another 501c3 of their choice. So on the one, so for investors who are even looking for tax advantages, this contribution of 50% of their profits goes against their tax burden that they will have recognized as a result of the 4% interest rates and also the booster strategy. So really, it's a triple bottom line, but it's novel because we're not only depending on student loan interest, which is one category of investment, but we're also relying on equities. And the equities, and I should have said a little bit more about the EDIP strategy, but it's dividend producing equities with a covered call option. So it's hedged with covered call options. So there are various lines of income coming to the investor, and then at the tail end, money going to scholarships. So that is how we create scholarships for people like me, or low income, first generation, minority students who otherwise wouldn't have the wherewithal. So that in
That's
a
very
nutshell is
interesting.
what it
Yeah.
is.
Who manages the scholarship in that sense? Is that money that you give to specific universities? Do you give that directly to the students? Is that something they apply to through you? How does that work?
No. So within our program, we will have a donor advised fund. The donor advised fund is actually the Knights of Columbus donor advised fund, and they will be directing. So we will not be directing the scholarships ourselves. So our investors will be able to designate the university of their choice, nonprofit, so not any for-profit universities.
Right.
And it can even be, so if there are investors who are actually even looking to make an impact at an earlier level of education, this can also impact Catholic elementary and middle schools and high schools in your local community. So as long as 50% of the profit is going to scholarships, it can be university scholarships. I hope that there's a significant amount that will go to Notre Dame, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
But there are I recognize that there actually are other universities in the world that people might want to support.
Well, this is really interesting for us because you probably know that at the Idea Center, we're very focused on helping a lot of these people who would be underprivileged, those geniuses that might not have the same access. And we all know that disproportionately impacts Black, Brown communities and young students. And so this for us is a very interesting way to think about how do we structure financial instruments in a way that allows those students access to Notre Dame, the Idea Center, other things that would help them in their development and progress. If you're
Brian,
okay,
and
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I should probably say that, because you asked the other question, will students be applying directly to us? And the answer is no. So again, this is going to be, the scholarships will be need-based. That's going to be kind of the first level, and it will be through the institution. So we'll have and you're right, it will probably advantage disproportionately students of color and first generation students, but that's going to be done outside of our purview.
Sure. But I think that from our perspective, that's where we'd like to see the biggest impact. And so it's interesting that this would have that opportunity. If you're okay, we have a couple of questions. We can start with the first one. So the first question is, how do you define impact? Is it just a positive effect? Is it something more concrete? Can it be proven? Can it be measured? Should it be measured? I mean, in this case, I think that we could measure it pretty easily, right? How much money are we giving to this scholarship fund? How many students is it advantaging? But in general, as you talk about impact investing, would someone say, well, the iPhone has impacted society pretty dramatically?
Yes, it has.
Maybe not
you're right.
positively either.
So I'm going to go kind of from the granular to the larger. So you're right, on a granular level, we can measure the impact that we're having in terms of the number of loans that we refinance, whether students that we of whose loans we refinance are saving between 10 and 50%, so we can actually measure the dollars that they will save. We can measure the amount of dollars that they could therefore invest towards their future retirement. We can measure the dollar value of the scholarships that we are awarding. So those are all the easily measurable impacts that we're having on our granular level. On
Mhm.
a larger perspective, so keep in mind that the whole notion of impact investing is actually rather new. So from 2007 on is not a whole long time. There is underway right now an initiative. It's called the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative, and it's a joint task force between Harvard Business School, the G8 Social Impact Investment Group, and the 2,000 practitioners worldwide of impact investing. They're working together to come up with a standardized way to value the impact different
Mm.
investments have. So at the moment, there's not anything that I can point to directly. We also have someone, a member of our board and a faculty member at Notre Dame, who is helping us come up with other specific measurements of our impact. So, so the easy answer is yes, it's easy to measure, but there does need to be a generalized and standardized way of accounting for the effect of an impact on your investment.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Second question I have here, which I actually had the same question, so I'm glad it got asked. What happens if the government forgives all the loans? And how do you feel about the ethical questions that raises, given all those who sacrificed and paid off loans or scraped by to not have any? What are your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. Um, so first of all, I think that what we expect, okay, so I'll tell you what I actually expect. I do expect that there's going to be a forgiveness of $10,000 in loans for students who qualify.
Mm.
I'm completely okay with that. We as a company are completely okay with that. The reason why I say that is because we know that the greatest number of defaults come from those who have the least amount in loan indebtedness. There's an inverse relationship between the amount that you have in loans and your risk of defaulting on it.
Interesting.
So a medical student who has an average $250,000 loan is least likely to default. Whereas those who have five or $10,000 in loan, often who borrowed that money in order to go to a for-profit college, they took out those loans um, without really knowing what they were undertaking. And those are the ones that are most likely to default. I'm completely okay with that. I think that'll also have a stimulative benefit on the country, because if you put all of that money back into the country, you give everybody $10,000 of loan forgiveness, they have $10,000 to spend essentially. Maybe it's a jaundiced view on my part, or maybe it's my age or my experience or the fact that I was a government major. The government is not going to forgive all student loan. And you're right that there are some moral perils, because why is it that someone who just happened um, to graduate this year with $100,000 in debt should have their loan forgiven, whereas somebody who graduated 2 years ago and worked their what's off to pay
Yeah.
off those loans didn't get their loans forgiven?
Mhm.
It's not going to happen. So anyway, I'm just saying that. I think that was your question. What are my thoughts on it? I don't think it's going to happen. The smaller loans, we're completely okay, and it will have no impact on us, because remember that we're going to, and maybe I didn't say this before, we're primarily going to be refinancing the loans of students with high student indebtedness. So
Yeah.
those likely to default, from medical schools, law schools, MBA schools, and the top schools even amongst those.
So, a question we have next that goes right to that is, how are you going to source the loans that will make up this portfolio, and how will you administer the monitoring of those loans once it's part of the fund? So in other words, you're going to clearly have people come to you and say, I want to refinance this. Are you doing that work, or are you outsourcing that work?
Oh, absolutely outsourcing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have two different technology stacks that have been built, one for investors and one for borrowers, and those two technology stacks will have to will have to speak to one another because investors are going to get paid from both portions, from both equity as well as loan. Um, so the way that it's going to work is after the initial soft pool of a student's credit, and once we think that they are eligible to receive a loan, their loan will go through a deeper search through Loanwell, and they will be using our criteria. So students have to have graduated from one of these colleges that I discussed with a 98% repayment rate, have a credit score above 700, be fully employed, and have documents to attest to that. So all of those criteria will be part of our refinancing decision. Once we have made that refinancing decision through Loanwell, so that's going to be who is making that decision on our behalf. Bank of Lake Mills, we will notify the bank, and I'm going really deep into some of the detail. Bank of Lake Mills will be notified that this student is eligible for refinancing. We will give them the money to pay off the loan. They'll pay off the loan. We'll buy the loan back from them, and the documents will be held in Kingdom Trust, which is also where our investor documents are going to be held. Anyway, so I hope that answered the question. It was a lot of names, and but if again, for anybody who wants more information, go to our website and you can look all of this up.
I was just going to say, we've gotten a bunch of questions that are very specific into the actual instruments themselves, which I think what I would rather have do is have them contact you directly, Elizabeth, and get more information on some of these more specific financial questions. Do you want to tell everyone the email address that they can get a hold of you?
Sure, absolutely. And it's easy. My first initial is C. My first name is actually Christine, but it's C.Elizabeth@impactcapitalfunds.com.
Awesome. And we'll throw that in the chat or in the message out to everybody. Nick, if you would do that way, everyone can have that.
Okay.
So we really appreciate this time, Elizabeth, and you taking a minute to talk with us a little bit. We are very interested here at the Idea Center about how we make more accessible an education that changes, we think, the trajectories of people's financial lives, right? I mean, if you talk about socioeconomic status and the ability to, build families and societies and communities, this is going to happen as we give opportunities to more and more people equally across the spectrum. So,
and Brian, can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So, obviously, when we're talking about this, our first fund, Irish Impact, we have talked as a company and as a board of directors, we've talked about our ability to scale it and even to white label it for other institutions. So there's tremendous opportunity for this to impact other groups of students from historically Black colleges and universities, the entire ecosystem of American Catholic colleges and universities, which has something like 900,000 students annually. This can do tremendous good, and it does disrupt the current way that loans are divvied out to students, because we're not basing this on what will the market bear. This because our ultimate goal is the creation of new monies for students who can't afford college. Our goal is to, again, that whole triple impact, to lower rates as low as we can while also creating scholarships and return for our investors.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, this has been fantastic. I really wish we'd have been able to have this conversation the week that Notre Dame played Alabama, because as I've mentioned a number of times,
I know.
Yeah, we've never lost. Whenever we've had one of these on game day, we've never lost. And so, but that would have put a tremendous amount of pressure on all of us as well. So maybe it's all good, right?
Yeah, to tell you the truth, watching the game on Monday night, I'm thinking, I'm really glad we're not in this game. And I'm glad that I wasn't in last week's webinar. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Well, we really appreciate you making some time, Elizabeth. Thank you for doing this. I learned a lot listening to your great knowledge on these impact funds, and excited about how we can be engaged with that here at Notre Dame as we go forward. And again, if there are any questions from anybody who is listening today, please, we'd invite you get a hold of Elizabeth directly. And we invite you also to get connected to the Idea Center. And with that, we'll say thank you very much for everybody who has participated, and have a great day. And hopefully we'll see you at our next webinar.
Go Irish.
Yep.